All right, good morning, and thank you for joining us for the Lecturers Virtual Leadership Workshop. This morning, we're going to be talking about ways that we can continue to develop meaningful programs and educate our members. And in the time of COVID, how we can do that, whether our Granges are meeting safely in person or if we're not able to hold traditional meetings. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by sharing my screen. And I'm going to ask if you can nod or give me a thumbs up to let me know if you can see the screen. Okay. So my name is Jenn Nauss, and I am the Pennsylvania State Grange Lecturer. And I am joined today by several members of the Pennsylvania State Grange and hopefully others who will be watching this on YouTube later after it is available. So I wanted to start with just a quick reminder of what the role of the lecturer, or more recently called program director, what the role is of the program director in the Grange. And from the installation of officers, I pulled out some of what I think are the most meaningful parts. To you is assigned the important duty of leading in the literary program and the educational work of the Grange. And in that, to develop and to direct to greater usefulness the latent abilities of your fellow members. I think that we would all agree that lecturers and program directors play a unique and important role in the Grange. More than I think what is just described in the installation ode, I think that there are other roles or things that happen as a consequence of high quality programming. So I think that high quality programs can improve the engagement of our current active members. Certainly, we are invested in the business of our Granges and the work that we're doing, but having high quality educational programs for our members that can engage them and keep them involved certainly makes them want to continue coming to meetings. I think that they are also a way to increase the attendance or participation of members that we have on our rolls, but that may be inactive, who may not come to every meeting or are necessarily as interested or motivated by the business work of the Grange, but who we might be able to attract or appeal to with a high quality program that is of interest to them. I think that programs are a fabulous way to appeal to non-members that are in our community. So members of our community who are not familiar with the Grange, we might not ever get them to step foot in our halls or in our meeting spaces because of the business work of the Grange, but we might be able to appeal to them to get them to come to a meeting if there is a program that we're offering that is open to the community, as all of our Grange meetings are at this point, and to appeal to them if it is something of interest to them. And getting their foot in the door and getting them to come to a meeting or getting them to engage with the Grange in some way, I think is the first step to possibly gaining them as new members. And high quality programs, when we publicize them, can really do great work to get information about the Grange out into the community. So the lecturer program director in the Grange, I think, plays a very important role in not only getting our current members to be more active and involved, but also are really important for membership growth. So, and I know that the people that I'm speaking to on this Zoom this morning know this already, but what is it that makes a high quality program? Topics that are meaningful, interesting, and timely. So things that are of interest to members or of the community, timely. So things that are happening now, kind of hot button issues. Programs that are well planned and organized. So not something that's planned kind of spur of the moment, but something that has been given some thought and some organization prior to the meeting. Led by an expert on the topic for credibility. And when I use the word expert, I don't necessarily mean a professor at a university, but somebody who is knowledgeable on that topic. And that could be a member of our Grange. It could be the lecturer, program director themselves, or it could be an outside speaker working with an organization or in the community that is an expert or somebody who knows about the topic that the program is focused on. A high quality program should be engaging and keeping the listener's attention. And we'll talk about this later, publicity or sharing the word about that program is essential. So planning, which we talked about, I believe is one of the most essential components. If we are not planning, I think it could lead to programs that are not as successful as they could be. Not planning in advance also, I think, at least in my personal experience, leads to increased stress for the person who is organizing that program and could potentially lead to decreased engagement of the members. So if we don't know what our programs are in advance, or if we're not sharing that information with our members for them to know or get excited or enthused about the topic, I think that we risk losing some of their engagement and interest in the program. So just some suggestions, and then I'm going to actually open up the floor here for some discussion, because I know that everybody has different planning practices, things that they do. So I'll open the floor then here in a minute to share any helpful hints. But some that I have thought of would be to make a calendar of programs at least a few months in advance. So Granges should know when their meetings are scheduled for the year, and to make a calendar of those meetings, and on the calendar plan out what the programs will be at those meetings. If you have outside speakers or speakers from within the Grange, make sure that they are contacted and that plans are made well in advance. And then to make sure that all materials that you might need, so handouts or flyers or anything else that you're going to be using for the program, to make sure that they are prepared and ready for the program. I also think that it's really critical that even though you are the lecturer program director, does not mean that you have to do this completely on your own. So assembling a committee of Grange members to help plan programs, surveying the members of your Grange for ideas and asking for their input, reading the local news and following local trends in the area also is really helpful, I think, in coming up with program ideas that are meaningful and timely. So I'll open up the floor if anybody else has any helpful hints or suggestions that they have found when they are planning that have worked for them.
Well, Jen knows that we've discussed many times. I think her suggestions about communicating both with the membership and with the public is very important. I think sometimes the Grange hides its light too much under a bushel and doesn't share information as well as we should, because we can't assume because you and I know what's going on that our members, let alone the public, knows what's going on.
Right.
At Pioneer Grange, we have a newsletter, I guess it's a quarterly newsletter that we print out what we're having going on in the Grange, and our programs, and if we have any fundraisers that quarter that we mail out to our Grange members.
Well, I think a newsletter is essential, and I'm surprised at how many Granges have no such thing. But I would be an advocate that it needs to be more frequent than once a quarter, because you know how busy everybody is, and you get it, you read it, maybe put it on the refrigerator or post it on your desk, but people need to be reminded over and over again. So I think frequency and social media is a good way to get information into people's hands quickly and easily and at no cost.
Right, right.
That's what I was going to say. Our newsletter's published quarterly, but our secretary, usually at least monthly, sends out an email to all the Grange members. Now, it doesn't go out to the community, but to the Grange members, reminding them the meetings, you know, such and such a date, and this is what we have going on. So, but we're not great about getting that information out in the community so that the community knows what's going on, unless we're having a dinner or something to raise, you know, a fundraiser. But as far as our planned programs for meetings, we don't advertise that to the community as much.
Well, we all know that if the community
listening
doesn't
to-
know, they're probably not going to be involved, attend, or join.
Right. Well, our newspaper, we don't get good coverage in our newspaper. So I think as time has gone on, we've kind of ignored that that ability to get that word out to the community. We'll post things on Facebook, like I said, for fundraisers or events, you know, rabies clinics and stuff like that. But just, you know, maybe a program, an educational program of interest. We don't publicize that to the community. And maybe that's where we're lacking.
Well, something that I think about is listening to this conversation. If you're going to have a lectures program that is interesting, timely, etc., I'm thinking it should be more the focal of the meeting versus putting it in crouched in the agenda, because, you know, if we're going to be bringing people in from the outside, then they came to hear that program. They didn't come to sit through that business meeting. So, you know, and I guess it's kind of a philosophy. What is the purpose of the Grange? Is it to conduct monthly meeting businesses, or do we every quarter have an educational program? You know, that's kind of one of those things. How well is that presented to attract people in and not cause a problem with conducting business?
And so Granges have the flexibility, and feel free for others to chime in here. But you know, I know that Granges will sometimes have an abbreviated business meeting, so they're not conducting the work of the Grange or the business of the Grange, but they're doing the things that absolutely have to be done at that meeting, and maybe putting some other things on a back burner in order to make that program the focal point of the meeting. I know that Granges will sometimes kind of change the order of business and hold the literary program first, to get to that right away. And then when the program is done, then they proceed with the business of the meeting. And I know other Granges that, like, for example, my home Grange, Valley Grange 1360, has 2 meetings a month, which I know is not the case for every Grange. But it would definitely be possible for us to have one of those meetings as a really business heavy meeting in order to make the other one more for programming. I know that Granges will sometimes hold or schedule a separate business meeting outside of their normal meeting if they know that it's going to be a big program, in order to get the business done. So Granges do have the flexibility to work with the order of business to make it work for them. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts there.
Well, to follow up on Jen's, at Valley, a lot of times if we have an outside speaker, we'll go ahead and do the opening ceremony so that they get that taste of the Grange. And then we'll go right to the literary program. And then we'll say, you're welcome to stay. We'll be going into our business meeting, but if you prefer to leave, or something to that effect, that they can leave, and then we'll continue with whatever business has to be done.
I agree with what you're all saying, and this goes far beyond the lecturer's responsibility. But one of my pet peeves has always been that Granges aren't very well, many Granges are not very well prepared, and therefore the business just drags on endlessly, and it is not very interesting for most members. You know, if we use committees and we come with reports and recommendations rather than discussing things from, you know, the ground up, the meetings are so much more interesting for everybody involved. But to get that accomplished, we really need to work on our leadership development.
I think too, if you want to if you are targeting some non-members at various meetings, I think it's important for them to see what business you're transacting and how your meeting runs. Otherwise, they're not going to know anything else about the Grange. You know, that's a good way to promote it is, and if, I agree with Doug that some leadership capabilities are not there in order to conduct something so that it's not dragged out and very boring to those that are there. But if you don't go through some of that, then these non-members that are there are not going to get that opportunity to learn about the organization.
You're absolutely correct. So I think that as much as we can to have a well-organized meeting that the business doesn't, you know, drag on, but can introduce non-members to the work of the Grange is definitely what we should be aiming for. All right, so the next thing to talk about is, so what about COVID? So I certainly, if you would have asked me last March if I thought that we'd still be having conversations about COVID and its impact more than a year later, I'm not sure that I would have. I look back and think that was a pretty naive way of thinking, because certainly I think that we're in this for the long haul, but COVID has certainly disrupted how we've been able to meet as Granges. I know many Granges have had to cancel meetings or move their meetings virtually. Even our own State Grange session in October was very different than what we're used to because of COVID. And unfortunately, although I think that things are better and I'm very hopeful with the vaccine being more readily available, I'm very hopeful with the weather getting nicer outside that we might have a bit of a reprieve from COVID, certainly not going away, but better circumstances than we've had through the fall and winter. But I certainly think it's something that's going to be with us for a while, and that even once COVID is mostly better, I think that we are going to have a pretty lengthy transition period coming out of COVID when we are returning to or moving to what the new normal will be. So although it has certainly disrupted how we have been able to do things, I really am a strong proponent that it should not cancel the work of our Granges. So even if our meetings look different, or even if we are not able to meet in person, it doesn't mean that the work of our Granges should be put on hold. And that includes the educational work of our Granges. And perhaps I think more now than ever before, in addition to COVID, and I think there being a lot of kind of confusion and people that are seeking and wanting information about things, we also live in a very divided society, more division than ever, where people can kind of pick and choose where they're getting their information and where they're getting their news sources. And so I think that our role as a nonpartisan organization in the Grange, and our role as lecturer and program director really can be to provide insight and to provide non-biased education and information about some topics that are really hot button issues now. So I think that now, and moving out of COVID to the new normal, that the work of the lecturer is more important than ever before. But it does make our roles look a little bit different with COVID and adjusting to differences in how we're holding meetings, it also means that there are differences in how we are holding programs in some circumstances. So I did want to talk a little bit about that today, and I don't want this to be a one-way street. So I really am hopeful that we can have some good discussion about what Granges are doing, what your Granges are doing, what has worked well for your Granges, and have some time for idea sharing here as well. So Granges that are able to meet in person, literary programs may not look much different than before, although our meetings certainly might look a little bit different from before, with changes in making sure that our members are a safe physical distance from one another. Masks have been, and I anticipate will be, something that we are working with for the foreseeable future. Knowing our meeting space maximum capacity and adhering to those capacity guidelines, right now 25% capacity indoor and 50% capacity outdoors, are just things to be aware of. And just something else to kind of consider is that there might be some speakers from some organizations that might not be permitted to speak at in-person functions yet. So that's just something to consider when planning and arranging for speakers, that might be something that you have to consider. Granges also have the option of meeting virtually, and I know many Granges have. And so literary programs in a virtual meeting space may look fairly similar, especially if it's a speaker speaking about a topic, with some modifications. I will say that in this age of virtual meetings, I would say most organizations, most speakers have become very comfortable with virtual meeting methods. So that really should not be something that is a tremendous roadblock to a speaker speaking at your meetings. The technology that we use, and I'm doing this right now, there are ways that we can share our screen to share materials and handouts. There are different ways I'm very comfortable with Zoom, but I know that free conference call is another program. But there are ways to engage and encourage our members through video conference software. And I just put a little note here. Please contact me if your Granges are using virtual means like Zoom. And if you would like any tips on how to do this, I could lead an entire separate workshop series just on how to use Zoom and other video conferencing software. But I don't want that to be the focus today. But if you or your Granges are interested in hearing some of those tips or would like some more information, please contact me. The only thing I want to just mention here is we do know that virtual attention span is a lot less than in person. So that's just something to be aware of. And again, goes to what Doug mentioned about organization, that it's really critical to make sure that we're organized and planned and have a game plan for the meeting and for the program so that it goes almost seamlessly or as quickly as it can, because we do start to lose that attention span of our members much quicker in a virtual landscape than whenever we are meeting in person. And for Granges that are not meeting, and I do know that there are several Granges that have not been able to meet because of concerns about using the virtual programs like Zoom or free conference call, or also because of safety of their members. But these are just some things to consider. So as the weather's getting nicer, outdoor meetings could be an option. So if your Granges have not been able to meet in person, um, it might soon be an appropriate time to consider that. Vaccines are increasingly available, so as your members become vaccinated, the weather's getting nicer, and following those safety guidelines and gathering restrictions, limiting shared materials, there are lots of ways that we can continue to meet in person while mitigating the risk as well. And again, this is something I think that we are going to maybe continue to see fluctuate as we see waves of the virus continuing, and hopefully they start to slow down or minimize. But I think it's definitely something that is a possibility, is that what is safe today, a week from now, we might have to rethink and reconsider. So flexibility of moving between meetings, um, ways that we're holding our meetings might be something that we have to think about. If it's not safe to meet in person, or if your members are not comfortable meeting in person, we can consider virtual meetings. I'm very familiar with Zoom, as it is what my school has been using and what a lot of organizations have been using, including a lot of Granges. There are free basic Zoom accounts that are available to everybody, but there are some limitations on those. So there are time limits on the meetings. Most free basic accounts do not have the option for phone in, so for phone users. So a free basic account probably is not going to work for a lot of Granges, and that's where the Pennsylvania State Grange can help you. So the Pennsylvania State Grange does have a professional Zoom account, actually 2 of them, and we are happy to work with Granges to use that paid Zoom account, the professional Zoom account, for you to use for your programs. And so the paid account allows for no time limitations on meetings. It allows for phone users to call in. So if your members might not have a computer or tablet or smartphone to access Zoom with video, they can call in from any phone to access the meeting as well. And so I would encourage you, if you have not already done so, if your Grange would like to meet virtually, please take advantage of those Zoom accounts that are offered with the Pennsylvania State Grange, and give the State Grange office a call, or you can contact me and we would be happy to help you get set up with that. Free conference call is another program, and that is a free program that is kind of a pay as you are able. So that is another option for Granges who might not want to use Zoom. And if your Grange cannot meet, or if we get to parts or situations in COVID where it's really not safe to meet in person and virtual meetings are not an option, there are, I think, certainly other things to consider to continue to keep your members engaged, instead of putting the work of your Grange completely on hold. So we've talked about a newsletter. I think that that could be especially important, as a way of contacting and maintaining contact with your members if you're not able to meet. Send out information or fact flyers about important topics, and you can work with a speaker that would have attended a meeting to speak to put together those flyers to get information into the hands of your members. And then regular contact and outreach to members to keep the Grange kind of first in their thoughts, so that the work of the Grange is not forgotten. So those are just some things that I thought of as we navigate COVID. I would like to open up to a conversation about what your Granges have been doing, if your Granges have been able to meet in person or if you've been meeting virtually, what programming has looked like during this time for your Granges, if you've had things that you have found a lot of success with or that have been working well, or an honest conversation about what the limitations are with some of these other means of meeting not in person. So I'll open up the floor if anybody has any thoughts or ideas they would like to share.
My programs really haven't changed all that much we usually just have about 10 to 11 people coming, to our meetings. So it's certainly not hard for us to be socially distanced. And as far as my programs go, I do have the educational ones. We have been doing a lot of crafts lately, where we just this past Thursday, we made bird feeders with the gelatin and putting, Marcy kind of was in charge of that, putting it's gelatin, water, and birdseed, I think, basically. And then you put it in like a mold, a cookie cutter mold, and then you let it harden, and you kind of put a straw in to make a hole for the string, and we can hang it on, hang it outside and stuff. So that, we just did, and that was really fun. It didn't take long. At our next meeting, we're having a succulent craft where one of our other members is bringing like some seashells that she had, and then we'll put a large seashell, kind of like is it called a conch shell or something like that? One of the larger shells, and putting some ground in it, and then succulent plants. So we just do it. It just seems like with the few that are there, we like to do that kind of thing too. And then we intersperse it, like the next meeting it's going to be science with Ava. So she'll be bringing a microscope, and we'll be looking, under the microscope with some of the, I guess, different, I don't even know. Marcy didn't even tell me how, but I think different slides or whatever that she has. And I thought that would be interesting too, something different. But, instead of just reading, have members reading poems or something like that, we, try and do that. So that's what, like I said, the members right now that are coming to the meetings seem to be enjoying. So.
Well, and I think that's a critical piece too, is knowing your members and knowing your members' interests, and what is something that might be of interest at Valley Grange in York County might not be something that is of interest to members in Center County or in Berks County or in Beaver County. So I think that knowing your members and knowing what is of interest to them as well as the community, really, there's not a cookie cutter approach to being a program director. Programs that work well in one place might not work so well in another place. So that knowledge of your members, and I love that you're getting Ava, who's a junior, involved in leading one of those programs. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
I certainly don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think we have to realize that it is very difficult, even with the best of programs and the best of publicity, both internally and externally. It's really hard to get people's attention. And that's an ongoing challenge. How do we make the Grange more relevant? Because although our current active members might enjoy a particular type of program or a certain activity, I'm always thinking about what does it mean to the people outside the Grange, and how are we going to make them aware and say, hey, that organization is doing something that makes a difference and that can mean something to me personally. Because I'm very concerned about the future of the Grange. When I became active about 1,000 years ago, in the State Grange, we had 50, almost 60,000 members, and we have only 6,000, and it's declining every quarter. And I don't know how much longer we can be a viable organization if we can't find some out-of-the-box ways to do things and get our communities behind the Grange. Because I suspect, from knowing many of you, that your Granges might not necessarily be the center of the community as they once were. Some are, and that's wonderful if they are. But often our Granges are not looked on as, the premier organization in the community. I wish we could change that, but I have no solution. I'm hoping that somebody smarter than I on this call can tell me what that solution is.
Well, Doug, and I'm like you, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, however you prefaced that, but I think one of the things that we need to do is to realize the generations are changing. They are so into technology. I'm not. I'm pretty glad I've gotten to the point where I'm okay getting on the Zoom and participating that way. But, working with the North Central, those people, they don't have the access to internet, nor do they like that technology. technology. It's just not for them because they're, forgive me when I say this, they're too old because their technology is a telephone and the television. And and when Joe Stefanani was here in Center County because his wife was working on her PhD at Penn State University, I kind of developed a working relationship with him when it comes to membership. And he and Betsy Huber had a book, and this is what it is. The End of Membership as We Know It. And she has done research on the generations. And the sad part of that, one part that I read to this, she talks about organizations. And I love the Grange organization, but it's an antique because we are doing it the way we always did it. And that's not going to work with the generation X, Y, and the millennials. And so therefore, I have to stop being a blockhead and say, no, you have to do it my way. No, I have to say, no, I have to do it so I can attract you in. And, I think it would be wise, and I know we're talking large dollars, but have her come in and do a training so that we are aware how do we reach that audience, because they want to know, what's this organization going to do for me? The baby boomers were at the point where, oh, I'm willing to give to you and I'll give my lifeblood for your organization. But today they're saying, no, what are you going to give to me? I can maybe give you 6 hours, but don't ask me for any more. Our organization said you had to be at every meeting every month for the hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it went. You had to be there to be a Grange member. The new generation saying, nope, not for me. And looking at the workforce, I don't want to be in work today, so I'm going to call and say I'm calling off sick. We never did that. So we have to learn what is the mental forces of these generations. And and a lot of this has all come out of the technology. It's much easier for me to sit down, but not for me. I just don't like to do that. But I much prefer to be face to face, having a conversation. But these younger generations, they have grown up with technology. They're not afraid with it, and they can relish it and go and get whatever they do. So, like I said, I love the Grange organization. And after I retired from my employment, I thought, how do I get to know the community? That we moved back home, and I thought, well, gee, why not the Grange? I'm a naggy person at heart, and I like the whole aspect that the Grange is for rural America. And if we don't preserve rural America, we're going to be gone. I mean, agriculture at all. And people don't realize, if we don't support the farm community, where do they think they're going to get their food from? Hydroponic gardening? Some things, but not everything. And there again, I can go on a tirade on what I believe, but what is our niche? And someone had said that when I first started coming to Grange. We need to know what is our niche and be there and promote that niche. We can't be everything to everybody. So, okay, I'm stopping. Quiet.
No, those are a lot of the conversations that I have a lot of the time with finding that unfulfilled need in our communities and across the country, that the Grange can that the Grange can fill that need, because I think that that's a way of building relevance. But I don't think that we know exactly what that niche is. So I think that that's a very valid point. And I guess the question that I myself have over and over and over again, because I agree that we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them and not change at all because of everything that Cheryl just mentioned, that we were not attracting new members or appealing to non-members doing what we have always done. So the question for me then becomes, how do we, and maybe somebody on this call has the answer to this, or we can, or has a thought, how do we modernize or change in a way to appeal to younger generations who, and I've read the book that Cheryl held up, and it is a very fascinating read, who are not, for a younger generation, my age and younger, who are not interested in joining organizations in the ways that we have traditionally thought of membership or have traditionally appealed to people to belong to organizations like the Grange. So how do we meet those people where they're at so that the Grange appeals to them, that they want to give their time and energy to the Grange, but doing so in a way that we don't abandon the principles of the Grange that make the Grange, because I think that that is important as well, that we don't want to lose sight of why the Grange was founded, or why we do the work that we do, to just become kind of a social club. But I think that's kind of my thought, that I don't have an answer to, but that I think that we need to be working toward is finding those ways that maybe change how we Grange, but not why we Grange, if that makes any sense. And maybe somebody on the call has an answer to that question. I've not been able to come up with the solution to that yet.
And this isn't, this is not the answer to your question. And again, I'm throwing out another issue that we're dealing with, or with some of the Granges that I have belonged to. There are personalities in the past that has decimated the organization. And I remember when we were at the last the regional training back, the one we were able to have here in Center County. Well, I think maybe the youth, one of the youth chairpersons, said that they had an individual in their Grange, but they were able to kind of work around that individual and that attitude. But, and currently the Grange that I'm working with, some people says, I'm not coming because X, Y, and Z. And I mean, it's old history, but it has hurt so many people with those attitudes. It's like, why was the Grange that way? If fidelity and charity and all those words, and it's like, sometimes I'm not sure how well those words are played out in our organization. So again, that it's just it's a concern that I have, that history that is not good kind of hampers what we do. And there again, here in Center County, we have another, and I grew up with the fair. It was a great place, but now that I'm a member of the organization here in Center County, I see a different aspect to the fair. We're here, and again, this is me. It does, and I'm not reflecting on anybody else. This is me, that people join the Grange so they can be part of that fair committee. And it's like, no. If there was never a Grange organization, there would have never been a Grange fair. There would have been a fair, but it would not have been a Grange fair. And one of the things I think is important of our organization is community service. We're reaching out into a community, making a difference in that community. That's what we need to be highlighting, or the other important aspects of our organization. So again, that I guess I'm just bandwagoning or whatever, but those are some issues that we're dealing with. These are issues that I am dealing with here in Center County.
Well, I'd like to comment on that too, since I know all of you that are on this call, and I know that many of you are from Granges that do some events like the Center County Grange Fair or the Big Knob Fair, or Valley does the milkshake stand, and how people come out and love that kind of thing. So I think we have to ask the question, why is it if these things are so popular, yet we're missing the connection of getting at least some portion of the people that want to be in these things, whether it's the Center County Fair Board or whatever. Why is it that we're not connecting the dots and getting them in some way or another into the organization?
Something that struck me, what Cheryl said, was they want to come and maybe commit to 6 hours and not the numerous hours it takes to put something like the fair on. We often hear, oh, the Grange does great. We love having the Grange in the community, but it's too much work to belong to the Grange. And I think that's a perception that a lot of people have because of the fair and all the dinners we do and the things that we do that make us an active Grange. People perceive it as too big of a commitment.
Yeah.
So what does that say as to how we have to go about things differently? Do we change our mindset so that we somehow encourage and actually celebrate people who are willing to give us 6 hours, as opposed to saying, we need you here for every meeting and every time the hall's open, or every activity that's going on? See, that's not, I don't think that's our message right now. I think most of our Granges are, we latch on to people and we keep saying, will you, can you, and that does turn the younger people off.
I don't
That's-
think too, a lot of times that people, regardless of age, think about if you're doing community service work, it takes funds to do that. It also involves having enough funds in order, if you have a hall, to keep it up, the maintenance and the bills that are incurred by having a building of your own. I don't think people look at that aspect of it. And I guess, I look at younger people, or not necessarily younger people, but a lot of times I've heard, well, what's the Grange going to do for me? They want something tangible. And I never, I guess because I was brought up in it, never looked at it that way. I look at what the Grange actually gave to me that's not necessarily right out there in black and white. Probably a lot of you are saying, I wish that Grange hadn't taught you how to talk, but that's one of the things that it gave me, was the fact that I could get up in front of people and speak, and it didn't bother me. And the leadership training that I received by serving on numerous state Grange committees that I never anticipated doing. I belonged to the organization because I enjoyed it. And I don't think people look at that, regardless of age, they say, what's the Grange going to do for me, or what's it going to give me? And they don't look at the maybe non-tangible items or facets that it can provide you in your lifetime.
Well, that's very true, Susan. And in my study of Grange history, Oliver Hudson Kelly and others of the founders believed that the success of the organization was going to largely rest on providing services to its members. And most of you know that, the Grange did a lot of cooperative buying and had a lot of insurance programs, like the Blue Cross Blue Shield programs. That was really big in the state Grange in the 40s and the early 50s. All this have gone away because we can't compete with the big box stores, or the insurance companies were no longer willing to just sell to Grange members. They wanted, a bigger potential audience. And so we have lost a lot of that financial incentive that I think might get some people in. And then some of them may realize those intangible things you're talking about. But again, I'd like to think that good programs are going to turn the tide, but I don't think that alone will turn the tide, because the Grange has lost its competitive edge. Jen and I have often talked about, the National Grange wanted this initiative to connect the Grange with the FFA, which is a logical connection. And to say that the Grange can take up where FFA ends when you graduate from high school. Well, I'm sorry to have to say this, and I have experience both in my home Grange and at Eagle Grange, where Jen and I are involved. The Grange doesn't cut it in terms of offering what those kids are used to in the FFA. The FFA programs of leadership and all the different things that they do with the kids today are what the Grange youth program was 50 years ago when I first got involved. But we have less volunteers willing to lead those programs. And so what has happened is the FFA, which are staffed with teachers in our public schools, have taken over that role. And I don't know how we change enough and quickly enough to be the place where FFA members are going to graduate into the Grange.
And
Well, one of the things that I have done, when I came home back here, I kind of got involved with the FFA program, being a representative from the local Grange. Is there anything different? No, but I've been into the classroom several times saying, this is a Grange, or when I'm working with some of the kids, I say, think about the Grange once you graduate. So it's just, it's not the answer to the question, but it's one way to make the Grange present, planting the seed in the mind of an FFA member, saying this is something that you can do. Or, I had them come in and do an educational program in the Grange. So again, it just depends on who you are, how you see yourself connecting with the community. And I think, Jen, you had posted something, a quarterly note or something, and I was really excited at what I had read that you had posted, because again, that's an audience that I think we forget, the FFA and the 4-H, and as I was doing some research on what has Grange done in the past, it was the Grange that instituted the FFA program, the ag programs in school. They instituted the cooperative extension. And coming out of the cooperative extension career path, I didn't realize that the Grange was significant in helping to establish the cooperative extension system. And 4-H is a major component of the program. So again, we have to some way say, oh, now you can't be a 4-H member, you have to be a Grange member. No, how can we overlap and work together? Have the kids come in and help serve a meal, or whatever ways. There's a lot of creative ways to work with the FFA and 4-H members in your local community, because they're there.
Yeah, and I think to maybe kind of to summarize a little bit of what we've talked about and how it relates to programming is, I think that we need to find ways to connect with our community. And I think that lectures programs are one of those ways, certainly not the only way, but one of those ways. I think that we celebrate any time that we can get anybody that's not already a member in and involved in our Granges in any way. And so meeting them where they're at. If that's attending a program every once in a while, we celebrate that they're there those nights. We celebrate the 6 hours that they're able to give us, even if we wish that it were way more than 6 hours. But meeting people where they're at and celebrating what they're able to give us, I think is the first step on, I think that what we would hope, or maybe what we're used to, is kind of an instantaneous involvement, or they come to a meeting and they love it so much that they become members and stay on. And I think what we are learning more and more is that it is a much longer, drawn out process to the first step in the door, the first foot in the door to that more active commitment. But the only way that we get there is by doing those baby steps along the way. So celebrating what people are able to give us, even if we wish it was more, meeting them where they're at, bridging connections with other groups in our communities, whether that's youth groups like 4-H and FFA or other organizations in the community. But I think as many of those things as we can, and I think one of those pieces is programming, is one way of getting people's feet in the door and then going from there. And I think that over time, if we can celebrate the little things that people are willing to give us and are able to give us, any exposure that they have to the Grange is another opportunity for them to see or experience some of those intangible things that Susan was talking about, the things that are not necessarily monetary or tangible or instant gratification things, but the things that I think all of us on this call can say that we have gained from being members of the Grange, that maybe aren't quantifiable on paper, but are the things that keep us coming back to meetings and keep us involved. And so any opportunity we have to appreciate people for what they're able to give us is another opportunity that maybe they'll experience some of those intangible things that might want them to keep coming back. So I think that it's certainly not quick work. It's definitely, I think, work for the long haul, but we have to make those baby steps toward that process. And that's the only solution or kernel of wisdom I can come up with right now. But I think that we just keep on fighting the good fight and doing everything that we can to get the Grange out in the community. And programming is one of those things. I am going to go back to sharing my screen here for just a minute to wrap up the last couple of things. Can somebody give me a thumbs up to let me know if I can see that? Okay. I do want to again reiterate the importance of publicity. So regardless of how our Granges are meeting and the work that we're doing, we should be sharing our work with the community. And this certainly can include literary programs. If we don't share with the community, we are our own best kept secret. So we can't just expect that people will know about things automatically, or that even people will be actively seeking out information. So as many ways we can get information into the hands of other people, the more likely they are to see about it and possibly be interested. So I said that there should be information about programs and about other work of the Grange that should be shared before the meetings or activity, and also follow-up shared afterward. So someone should be responsible. It could be the lecturer, program director, it could be somebody else, should be responsible for that publicity. And I just have a couple of thoughts here. So sharing with traditional print media sources like newspapers, or like in this area, we get a shopper, mailings that might be sent out. So using those traditional print media sources, Social media is a really powerful tool, especially to get information out quickly. And I will just put in a little note here that if your Grange is not already using social media, or if you want some other ideas, please do contact the State Grange office, or myself. I'd be happy to help. Other local media that could be possibilities, so radio, TV. I will say that there are quite a few alternatives to what would be considered traditional print media. So a lot of areas have online newspapers or online news services. So that's another opportunity that isn't in paper but is another outlet for information. Flyers to hang out and ask your members to share with people that they know. And then in addition to outside community members, we also need to make sure that we are sharing information with our own members. So the importance of a newsletter, we talked about a few of these things: announcing upcoming meetings or programs, emailing those program reminders or meeting reminders or information. So I don't think that we can assume that our Grange members themselves even know what's going on if we don't make sure that we're communicating that with them. We did have a nice roundtable conversation. I appreciate everybody's participation. I don't want to spend too much time talking about these, but I do just want to hit a few highlights of the state lecturers programs and contests. So the next program that is coming up, contest that is coming up, is the talent contest, which is scheduled for the Saturday of Family Festival in the evening. If we have to cancel in-person family festival, or if something were to interrupt that plan, my plan is to hold the talent contest virtually, and I will get that information out to Granges. At this point, I think we're all keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that in person at family festival that we will be able to do that. Reports and scrapbooks are due to me by September 15th. I did mail the forms along with the lecturer's letter and other information to secretaries. It is also posted on the State Grange website on the lecturer's page. The photography contest is remaining virtual for this year. I'm asking that photos be submitted to me by September 15th. And then what we will do is hopefully we will be having exhibit rooms at state session this year. And if we do, I will be setting up a screen or some sort of a way to view the slideshow similar to last year. But the judging of that will be done ahead of time in case if we are not able to have an exhibit room, that the photography contest can continue. Pen in Hand is also due by September 15th. The Design a Program and Lectures Grant, which I really encourage you to take a look at. I know that there are lecturers across the state who are really designing wonderful programs, and I really do want to give recognition to those lecturers who are planning those high quality programs and also compiling those ideas into an idea book to share with Granges across the state. But it's critical that I do receive submissions in that category and in that contest in order to do that. So please take a look at that in the contest guide. The lecturers grant is also available to give money to Granges who might wish to have a program, kind of a dream program, something that they really want to do but might not have the money to do it. The lecturers grant was developed in order to help support lecturers. So please take a look at those programs, and they are also due by September 15th. And again, hoping that we will have an exhibit room this year. The My Favorite Anything and art contest will continue to be judged at state session. So those are things to bring along to state session. There's also quite a bit of information about national lectures, programs, and contests that are on the State Grange website on the lectures page. The quilt block contest information is on there, as well as information about the virtual photography contest and the publicity contest. And Cheryl had mentioned earlier, and I do want to show you where these are quick. The National Lectures Department is now compiling a quarterly newsletter called a quarter's worth newsletter. I'm going to stop sharing this quick so that I can show you where that information is. So if you go to the State Grange website and look under departments and then lecturers, down here, I have uploaded all of the quarter's worth newsletters. And so they are put out every quarter by the National Lecturers Department, and they contain submissions from lecturers around the country. So there are some good ideas here for programs and other activities or events, as well as helpful hints and some other information and updates. So I would encourage you to take a look at those. The next one will be coming out in May, and it will also be posted to the State Grange website for you to access. And at this point, I will stop sharing and ask if anybody has any questions or other things that they wish to share. Uh-oh, Cheryl, I think you're muted. I see you're talking, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, a question. The Pomona has the opportunity to submit a lecture scrapbook,
Mhm.
and we meet quarterly, but the lecture does not do a program every time. We have a memorial service on one and something else in another meeting. So I might have maybe 2 programs that I
Okay.
might have the opportunity to do. So how, I mean, and as compared to doing a subordinate Grange, it's kind of lackluster, don't have a lot of information to share. And like I said, it's the first time being a Pomona lecturer. How do we go about submitting a Pomona Grange form?
So if you would like to do a scrapbook, it can certainly still be a scrapbook, but with whatever information you have, or the report form. And the forms and the scrapbooks are again being judged separately this year. So Granges that submit just reports will be judged in one class, and Granges that submit reports with a scrapbook will be judged separately. So you can do either of those options, and I would say just to share what information you have. Pomonas are very, I would say, differ widely across the state, from Pomona Granges that meet monthly to Pomona Granges that meet quarterly. So every Pomona is, I think, a little bit different in terms of not only their meeting schedule, but then the programs that they would hold at those meetings. So I would say to complete the form or the scrapbook with whatever information you might have.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say that most Pomona scrapbooks are considerably smaller than subordinates for exactly that reason, because you're talking about, most only have 4 meetings a year as opposed to 12 or more. So they are usually considerably smaller than the subordinate ones. All right, any other questions? Okay, I want to thank you all very much for attending this morning, and for engaging in the conversations that we had this morning. I really, really appreciate your interest in being here this morning and your participation. I would just like to remind you and those that are watching on YouTube that our next workshop in the virtual leadership workshop series is next Saturday, April 24th at 10 o'clock a.m. And Karen Poorman from the Family Activities Committee will be leading a workshop about the family activities work. So I hope to see you then, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, everyone.